Greetings everyone, and welcome to this quick video where I thought we might just take a moment to pay our respects to the Blender game engine, which was developed back in the year 2000 and has now seen its end in 2018. The developers decided that by removing some of the older functionality like the game engine, it would be a crucial step in developing the 2.8 branch. In addition to losing the game engine, Blender internal rendering engine was also removed, making way for Eevee, which is 2.8's real-time rendering engine. And this is something that we should all be excited for. 2.8 will no doubt be amazing. Still, it will feel a little sad not to have the game engine included in newer Blender releases. Having said that, there is one important thing to remember, and that's 2.8 will have features that will make our game development in 2.79 infinitely better. One example is that denoising is coming to texture baking, which anyone who has ever tried to bake the textures for a game environment, especially like a low lighting game environment, knows that that's impossible to do without a lot of noise and fireflies in your scene, and it takes a really long time to clean that up. But now with denoising being added to texture baking, it'll likely be just as simple as checking a box, and perhaps waiting a little longer for our baking times, but our textures will look a lot better. To pay homage to the Blender game engine, I created this little character, which is free to download. I'll leave a Dropbox link in the description. And I think the thing that makes me most sentimental about the Blender game engine is that I think it vastly improved my skills as a CG artist. Kind of pushing me into learning a little more about animation and different like varying types of texture work. Yeah, it's definitely improved my skills elsewhere in CG. So I just want to take a moment to thank all of the Blender developers over the years who have worked on the Blender game engine for a truly incredible experience. And even new developers who continue with projects like UpBGE and the Armory engine for Blender. And who knows what the future holds. I'm sure all of us can agree that some type of game engine or interactive mode in newer versions of Blender using Eevee's real-time viewport would be pretty amazing. Until that day, I will continue to use the 2.79 game engine just for creating little projects like this. But also I will be including little tips and tricks on my YouTube channel, such as this one. Did you know that you can play your Blender game engine games in Stereoscopic 3D? And while this technology is considered a little outdated, it's still pretty incredible to be able to create a 3D environment and then experience it in Anaglyph 3D with these red and cyan glasses. Setting this feature up is actually really easy to do. There's only a few settings, so let's take a look at those now. First, make sure that you're in the Blender game engine, and then come over to your render settings and scroll all the way down to where it says stereo, and then click this little stereo tab. And here underneath we have it set to Anaglyph by default, but there's all these other various settings for different types of 3D glasses, I think. And this eye separation, we need to pay attention to that because when you press play, you can see the effect taking place, but that red and blue is a little too far apart. So I'll type escape to exit the game. And what we want is the red to be on the left and the cyan to be on the right, but they shouldn't be too far apart from one another, or else the 3D effect will seem blurry and a little straining on the eyes. So I'll set this to 0.2, and that's still a bit too far, so we'll change it to 0.3, and that looks pretty good. So, depending on what you have in your scene, you'll probably always have to tinker with that eye separation value a little bit. And it might be, different, each time, but definitely a very cool feature added to the Blender game engine. And one final point I'd like to make, because I know there are a lot of haters out there that don't really see the point in the Blender game engine when there are alternatives like the, Unreal Engine and Unity and so on. But I created this whole scene as simple as it is in just a couple of hours. And that includes modeling, texturing, and the logic in the Blender game engine. So, there just are very few alternatives in the world that maybe nothing else like Blender that makes game development this simple. So for that, we'll always love the Blender game engine.